Left to the jaw has knocked you down in that shallow deep pool where you're drowning. Come high water, beat to hell. You've reached the bottom of the well.
My first question was, how much advanced warning was there exactly about this? So I began researching extensively. So far, what we know is that the rally was ideated by Ali Alexander, super extreme pro, if you will, Trumpster. And he suggests that he brewed up the idea along with 3 other members of Congress. And the idea, though, from the get-go for Ali wasn't a normal protest. It wasn't just to get out there and wave flags and stand up for your rights and have a big group of people be seen. As Ali Alexander wrote it, "I'm willing to give my life for this fight." That was his tweet on December 6th when this rally was announced. The very next day, the Arizona Republican Party responded with their own tweet, and it said, "He is, are you?" And best I can tell, that was the stake in the ground that defined what this protest intended to be like. Where I originally thought this started was Donald Trump's quote on December 19th. December 19th, though, now I know that Donald Trump had been notified that Ali Alexander and perhaps others had formulated this and set this into motion. And so once Trump got wind of it, he tweeted on December the 19th, "Big protest in DC. Be there. It will be wild." December 26th. I didn't know this before, but I didn't know of David Ignatius before this research, but David Ignatius is ultra-conservative. And he kind of shocked a lot of people and garnered a lot of attention when ultra-conservative David Ignatius wrote an op-ed piece and predicted how potentially dangerous the January 6th rally was going to be. He did so with these exact words. "The big showdown is January 6th. Trump's last-ditch campaign will almost certainly fail in Congress. The greater danger is on the streets, where pro-Trump forces are already threatening chaos. Government officials fear that if violence spreads, Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act to mobilize the military." So in response, another political writer, Steve Bannon, 2 days later, registers his opinion. First, he weighs in about the potential gravity of this protest. But near the end, he retracts a little bit. And listen to his words. He says at the end of his thing, "In my heart of hearts, I'm tempted to believe that the Trump era will end with a pitiful whimper. And it's possible that the turnout of his wild January 6th gathering will be trivial. Perhaps those most concerned about the president's autocratic fantasies have exaggerated what the hapless Republican is capable of. Or perhaps I'm being naive and overly optimistic. For those keeping track, January 6th is 9 days away, and Biden's inauguration is 23. I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not a Republican. I'm an American. And that might be good for you to know at this point in my retelling of the events of the day, which now bring us up to December the 30th. And according to deleted tweets, Alexander tweeted that if the Democrats got in the way of the Republicans' objection to certify the election, he would, quote, "Everyone can guess what me and 500,000 others will do to that building. 1776 is always an option." December 31st, 2020. This is what is written in the USA Today. Remember, my question is, how much advanced warning was there leading up to the siege of the US Capitol? Imagine my surprise to learn that on December 31st, USA Today, not exactly heavy-duty reading, not exactly hard-hitting journalism, and forgive me if I'm wrong, carried this article. Washington, a city accustomed to mass protests, is gearing up for an especially intense one over what should be the most mundane of political events, the counting of the Electoral College votes during a special joint session of Congress. Later on in his article, he writes, "Knife fights, shouting matches, and verbal harassment of Trump opponents accompanied previous demonstrations following Biden's election win. But now federal and local law enforcement are bracing for what may be the most intense Trump protest yet." And then he said, "For weeks ahead of the date, members of online Stop the Steal groups discussed tactics, weapons, and referred to occupying the Capitol, openly communicating on social media about potential violence, including specifically discussing plans to occupy that building." The new year comes in. January 2nd, on a Saturday, Trump tweets, "He didn't win the election. He lost all 6 swing states by a lot. They then dumped hundreds of thousands of votes in each one and got caught. Now Republican politicians have to fight so that their great victory is not stolen. Don't be weak fools." And on the same day, Trump phoned the person in charge of Georgia's election, and I'm sure we all recall that he said something to the effect of, "I just need 11,000 more votes. Find me 11,000 more votes." Sunday, June the 3rd comes around, right? Sunday, June the 3rd, that's 3 days before the siege of the US Capitol. So we're clear. There's a lot of conversation going on, right? It's super clear that this thing has potential to be off the hook, cataclysmic and violent. And on that Sunday, Pentagon twice offers to send in the National Guard. Good, excellent, an appropriate response, but they're told by the United States Capitol Police, and that's what I learned, is that Capitol has its own police force, but the United States Capitol Police Force, who are headed up by a man named Stephen Sund, he's their chief, tells the Pentagon, don't need the National Guard. What the fuck? Apparently Stephen Sund had eaten his Wheaties that day and was just feeling super capable with his own force. Monday, January the 4th, USA Today again, but this time they run a headline that says, "Nation's capital braces for violence as extremist groups converge to protest Trump's election loss." You know what for me is the key word in this sentence? It's not violence. It's extremist groups. And in other news, on Monday, January the 4th, Washington's mayor, Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, urged federal law enforcement to maintain a light footprint that day. Now, That obviously begs the question, what in the hell is going on? Nobody wants police support. So I dug, and there's not a lot on this. But I found one reference to why Washington's mayor, a Democrat, said, hey, let's keep the police force light. And it is seeking to avoid the type of show of force that was so heavily criticized in inflamed, tense protests previously during the year. Tuesday, January 5th. Now we're at the day before the siege of the U.S. Capitol. What happened on that day? Well, you might remember that the Senate runoff was going on in Georgia. Remember that big deal? Quickly overshadowed by the next day's big deal. Yeah, so that's going on, but the results haven't come in. But that night, many of the protesters have arrived in Washington, D.C. and have not missed the opportunity to fill the streets and march and rally. No problem. Except when they clash with the police. You might agree with me, except when they punch a woman in the face. Except when some of them are carrying weapons, and weapons are banned from Washington, D.C. And highly debatable, but except when a lot of them are wearing t-shirts that say MAGA, Civil War, Wednesday, January 6th, and Camp Auschwitz. So they do clash with law enforcement officers. According to news, at least 6 people are arrested for having weapons and ammunition and assaulting a police officer. Trump tweets that night, Washington is being inundated with people who don't want to see an election stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats. Our country has had enough. They won't take it anymore. We hear you and we love you. From the Oval Office. You know, that's the first time that part of that tweet is really registered with me. Just right now, saying those words from the Oval Office, no less. And he ended the tweet by saying, "Make America great again." I yelled that because it was written in all caps. And as a writer, generally, if you write something in all caps, it's because you want to yell it, shout it. So, forgive me for that. On Tuesday, January 5th, perhaps what's most interesting is the FBI in the Virginia office found something that they felt was entirely worth sending out on this network they have that sends an alert memo to every single kind of law enforcement agency there is from every single kind of branch. It was established to make sure that we had a rapid system for alerting for terrorism alerts. So what did they feel was so urgent? It was that they had spotted in those chat boards that extremists said they were preparing to travel to Washington, D.C. for January 6th to commit violence and war. And they were sharing maps of the Capitol building's very complex tunnel system. This is a quote we should all know. From the FBI. An online thread discussed a specific calls for violence to include stating, "Be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in, and blood from their BLM and Pantifa slave soldiers being spilled. Get violent. Stop calling this a march or a rally or a protest. Go there ready for war. We get our president or we die. Nothing else will achieve this goal. Holy shit balls. Thank God the FBI sent that warning out to all law enforcement the day before so that they can all get ready. And that's what I found when I went looking for how much advanced warning was there about this. Which brings us to the day of the siege itself, where my primary question was probably your primary question. How the fuck did they get in the building? Wednesday, June 6th, in the morning, Congressman Dan Dildy arrives, and as he tells it, shocked and afraid because the security is so light. And within Congress, in the days leading up to this, everybody was afraid. Congress people were afraid that there was some serious potential of risk on the day of the counting the Electoral College votes. So he fully anticipated, as I'm sure all did, that the security would be extreme on that day. And he pulls up into the parking lot and is like, who fucking missed, these are my words, who fucking missed the memo? Because there was none of the usual, what is protocol for situations such as protests that could turn violent. None of it was in place. What is that kind of protocol? Well, really big barriers, followed by more really big barriers. That's 2 layers of defense in case they breach this one, and they'd have to breach the next one. Tons of officers, dressed a special way. Like, you know, the way we always see them. Bulked up, bulletproof vests, camouflage, batons, shields, all kinds of shit, right? Well, at least all the stuff that they put at the Black Lives Matter movement earlier, including Apache helicopter flying over the crowd, back and forth. So, but on this day, oh, and you know, I didn't know this, but if the Black Lives Matter and previous protests that they thought, hey, there could be a danger of violence here, they set up what's called a multi-command center close by. What is a multi-command center? Look, I hardly know, but it's easy enough to discern because when you read what it says is, see, there's so many different branches of police force and law enforcement involved that all the commanders get to sit in the same center so that you're controlling the Bureau of Firearms next to the FBI, next to the National Guard, next to the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police and the U.S. Capitol Police, right? But on this day, no multi-command center. No easy chain of command. Because only 2 forces were present. The first was the U.S. Capitol Guards, of which there are 2,300 officers, of which, of the 2,300 on this particular day, with as much warning as was, only 500 of the officers are asked to come into work. The other 1,800 watched the siege at their couch, on their couches at home, enjoying a day off. Only 500 Capitol officers out of 2,300 asked by Stephen Sund to work that day. But the National Guard also sent some in. The National Guard sent in, allocated 340 guardsmen to be a part of it. hold on to your hat, because only 115 of them would work at a time. And those 115 people wouldn't be assigned to guard the Capitol. Why the fuck would they be assigned to guard the Capitol? We need them out there to direct traffic. I swear to God, this is true. And if you're having fun with this yet, they got dressed up for the day. Not in camouflage, not in bulletproof vests, my friends, in their dress blacks. In their dress blacks. You know, the ones that look nicer. The ones that you use for 4th of July. The ones you use for celebrations. The tuxedos. I swear to God. And the ones that don't come with you dressing up in your bulletproof vest is how those 115 National Guard were dressed on the morning of Wednesday, June 6th, directing traffic. So in total, there were 500 officers at the Capitol and 115 tuxedo-wearing guardsmen out directing traffic. Is it interesting to know the numbers of police force at the Black Lives Matter protest? 5,000 National Guard troops to start with, federal agencies such as the Bureau of Prisons and the Washington Police and the U.S. Park Police, and let's not forget that Army helicopter. Do you have questions at this point? Remember, my question is, how did they get in the building? I'm beginning to see an easier path. So, lots of people show up for the rally. Very successful numbers. 40 to 50,000 is the reported number. Donald Trump suggests that maybe there are 100,000 people. And I'm not here to care how many people were in that crowd, except that we could all agree it's a very large crowd with tens of thousands of people. And in the crowd, unbeknownst to most people, I'm guessing 99% of the people at that protest, were Molotov cocktails, pipe bombs, military assault rifles, rope for climbing buildings, sledgehammers for breaking things down, wood for building specific structures. Does that sound like what you would bring to a peaceful protest? 10:02 a.m. This is 10:02 is when Vice President Mike Pence, who was under request and pressure to overturn the election results with some kind of power that it was suggested, constitutional power was suggested he had to do so, but the legal community had weighed in and Mike Pence seemingly did his best to read the Constitution. And so Mike Pence issued a statement that said, hey, I fully considered my options from a constitutional legal perspective, and unfortunately, I can't do it. I have no unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should be not. That was at 10:02. Now, down by Freedom Plaza, the speeches of right before the march begin, and Giuliani speaks. And Giuliani uses the choice of words that will be examined closely for a long time to come. Giuliani suggests that maybe we should just solve this whole thing by trial by combat. Boy, you don't hear that phrase very often, do you? What the fuck does trial by combat mean? Doesn't sound peaceful. Doesn't sound judicial. And then Representative Mo Brooks, remember him? Ali Alexander suggested that Mo Brooks and him and two other people from the government from Congress thought up of having a January 6th rally. Well, Mel Brooks got to speak to the crowd, and he said, "Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass." And then somebody else got up and said, "This crowd has some fight." And this was all the warm-up act. There were more to Donald Trump, the President of the United States, giving his speech. And Donald Trump started speaking at 11 and gave an hour and 15-minute speech, the transcript which is available online, and I read it. So I took some notes from it. Fair notes, I believe. But I'd encourage you, please, read the transcript for yourself. Please. Like, that's what we need to do. We all need to start reading the source material whenever it's available for ourselves, or God help us all. So this is what I found interesting. Donald Trump uses the word fight exactly 20 times in his speech that morning. Donald Trump uses the word peacefully exactly 1 time in his speech that morning. That's a 20-to-1 ratio for those who are doing the math. A few seconds into a speech, the president says, "We have hundreds of thousands of people here, and I just want them to be recognized by the fake news media. Turn your cameras, please, and show what's really happening out here, because these people are not going to take it any longer. They're not going to take it any longer. Go ahead, turn your cameras, please. Would you show?" They came from all over the world, actually, but they came from all over our country. I just really want to see what they do. Now, admittedly, no one will ever know what Donald Trump meant by he really wanted to see what they do, because in the next sentence, he referred to wondering whether the media would show the size of the crowd. 17 minutes into a speech, Donald Trump says, "Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore." And that's what this is all about. To use a favorite term that all of you really came up with, we will stop the steal. 18 minutes in, Donald Trump said, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong." And with 2 minutes left in his talk, Donald Trump said, "We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." And he finishes on, "So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're going to the Capitol." But Trump is, in fact, not going to the Capitol. Trump is going home to the White House. So now the people at the protest, I presume the majority of them pro-Trump supporters, are moving down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol, where they encounter, what do we know already? Very little police presence, very little guarding, and super tiny little barrier fences. And so at about 12:53 p.m., this is the first recorded footage, you can watch it for yourself, of the first barricade falling down because some Trump protest. Can we make a distinction? Because what I see when I look at all the footage are 2 types. Trump protesters. Excellent. Good on you. God, such an important American right. And another type. What would you call them? The type that shows up in serious military gear. With some of them with weapons and headgear, and they're just ready for war. So let's make a distinction. The people that walked up to the fence in the first recorded video that shows at 12:53, these, I'm going to call them militia. I think that's the term they prefer. Militia walked up to the gate where there were 5 police officers, Capitol police officers, and the militia pushed over the gate and shoved over an officer and just poured on through. as if they had a plan. And so there's another gal on video, and she, she didn't stop. I don't think she stormed the Capitol. I think she just reported on how people stormed the Capitol because she just seemed so sweet and innocent. And she was just like, it was amazing. Like there was nobody stopping us from going to the Capitol. And when I got up to the lawns of the Capitol building, already people were moving up the stairs to the Capitol and sitting on the stairs and occupying it. And we were waiting our turn to get up to the Capitol. And you could just picture selfie all over it. Like, oh my God, I want a selfie on the Capitol. Wow, the Capitol's open. The steps of the Capitol are open today, surprisingly. But in another video, and we've all seen it, but isn't it the damnedest thing when you watch a Capitol police officer open the fucking gate for more of these militia to come through? And somewhere along this time, some carpenter is building serious gallows on the lawn of the Capitol, complete with a noose. So what's going on inside? Well, Stephen Sund, remember Stephen Sund, who is in charge of the Capitol Police, he's the chief. This is his territory to protect and defend. I guess he gets nervous. I guess he's having a change of mind because at 1:09 p.m. he calls the two other people that are in charge. There's three of them, right? He's top dog, but one to guard the Senate. He's called the House Sergeant of Arms and the Senate Sergeant of Arms, because ultimately in this story there are two rooms. There's the House and there's the Senate, and both of them are targets. So Stephen Sund calls him and says, "Hey, man." Ask them for an emergency declaration to call in the National Guard, and they both said they would run it up the chain. So, but it went. Look, what happens next? There really are nowhere near enough barriers to stop all those that suddenly had an enormous desire to either go in the Capitol building as previous was planned, or to go sit on the steps and just like go with what the fuck is happening here. And officers are, as they tell it, they're already in retreat mode. Some of them are already exhausted because they've already been in physical melees with the crowd. Shit's already going down. Like people, the tenor of this whole thing has changed to something else apparently is going on. And these police officers are getting hit over the head with bicycle racks and pipes. They are under attack. At least a big portion of this can no longer be called protesters, but some of them have to be called a mob, right? And mobs have entirely different behavior. For instance, we've seen the video of the mob pulling a police officer out of the doors of the Capitol and beating him to an inch of his life, one of them with an American flag, God damn it. Inside the Capitol, the Electoral College process had begun. They were voting on Arizona when they get an announcement over the phone that a recorded announcement that no one's allowed to enter or exit the building anymore because some shit is going down. And Stephen Sund calls again for more help. This time he calls the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police, and they send in reinforcements are on the way. How many, I do not know yet. The rioters are pushing to get in the doors. You can see the maps where all kinds of different forced entry from all sides of this Capitol building, seemingly from the reports, if we care. It seemed that the first entry point that gave way, that was penetrated, was from the east of the building. But what really matters is that scaffolding is being torn down, and the rioters at the doors and are banging at the doors and beating on the doors and trying to break the windows, and they will eventually be successful. And somewhere during this riot, this siege, this attack, Capitol officer Brian Sicknick is bashed over the head with a fire extinguisher. 42-year-old Brian Sicknick, who always dreamed of being a police officer, and who loved protecting the Capitol, and who was an avid Trump supporter, was bashed over the head with a fire extinguisher. Officers are trying to fire pepper spray into the crowd to hold them back. They're doing everything they can inside. Thank God some of the Capitol Police do have the shields and pepper spray and big bulletproof vests, and they're trying to hold those doors. And inside the Senate and the House chamber, they're beginning to know that shit's going on and it's getting tenser, and they're stopping the lawmaking process. And at 2:15 p.m., the mob breaches the door. We don't know what time, but somewhere either before the mob breaching the door or after the mob breaching the door, Roseanne Boyland, a protester from Georgia who their photographs of carrying a big yellow flag that said, "Don't tread on me," is unfortunately and awfully and ironically trampled to death by the mob, 34-year-old Roseanne Boyland. And then somewhere during the same thing, as the Capitol building is being breached, the mob breaks open one of the Capitol buildings, and the first person to try and go through is Ashley Babbitt, a resident of San Diego, not far from where I live, a pro-Trump supporter, and is shot in the neck as she tries to invade the U.S. Capitol building. Shot by a U.S. Capitol officer whose duty is to protect the U.S. Capitol from invasion. At 2:20 p.m., both of the chambers, the House and the Senate, they're both abruptly recessed. There's more confusion in the House in the House chamber, and the Senate is moving faster for evacuation. And at 2:24, Trump, who is reportedly in the White House the whole time, in his house the whole time, who is reportedly, but not certainly, enthralled and pleased at this point in the timeline to see how passionate and forceful his supporters are being. But he takes a moment to tweet. Takes a break from watching it on TV, takes a moment to tweet, and he tweets this: Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. In the middle of the rioting, that's Donald Trump's tweet. The mob is heard chanting, "Where is Pence? Where is Pence? Hang Mike Pence! Hang Mike Pence!" And at least 3 rioters are overheard by a journalist saying they want to find Pence and they want to execute him by hanging him from a tree on the White House lawn. Apparently, they don't know that somebody has built gallows somewhere out there. But they want Mike Pence. And I gotta tell you, this is disheartening. This is atrocious. This is philosophically confusing. Here's what I presume. What I presume is that the protesters at the rally care about the Constitution. Let's presume all of them do. Just like, let's presume, hopefully, that everybody cares about the Constitution that's an American. But let's say they do. And let's presume that pro-Trump supporters also have recognized that Pence, as a vice president, has been incredibly supportive of Donald Trump, the president, all the way. So, is it not disconcerting that perhaps one of Trump's greatest allies, is doing his constitutional duty, and there is a subset of the mob, and the more I look at this, the more I sometimes want to say the militia part of the mob, that wants to hang him, kill him. Because that makes me wonder, who the fuck is safe from these people? There's video footage, right? And it's, you've seen it. It's a Capitol Police officer, and he's black, he's African-American, he's black, and the mob is chasing him up the stairs inside the Capitol, and he is facing them and moving up the stairs backwards. And the minute you saw the video, you think he's kind of in control of this situation, but he better not trip, because if he trips, he's gonna get the fucking beatdown of his life, or the last experience of his life, one of the two. But you can see, like, come on, come on, come on. Well, it turns out the man has the perfect last name. He is Officer Eugene Goodman. Can't make this stuff up. Eugene Goodman made a very brave choice, for which I hope he gets a Medal of Honor. Eugene Goodman knew that the mob was getting very close to the key offices where senators were hiding. So he leads them away from the senators' offices, from which the mob had gotten a few feet, and fortunately survives. So inside the Senate, banging at the door, the Senate is gavelled to recess, and the Senate is told to go to a secret, secure location. Back to Chief Police Officer Stephen Sundit at 2:26, he joins a conference call with the Pentagon, and he makes urgent, immediate, desperate pleas for the National Guard, saying specifically, come on, I need some boots on the ground here. But he is rebuffed by a general who says that he cannot recommend the approval of the request because he doesn't like the photo op. Okay, he didn't say because he doesn't like the photo op. He said, I don't like the visual of the National Guard standing a police line with the Capitol in the background. Inside the House, Majority Leader is pleading with the Maryland's governor to send in the Maryland National Guard. His hands are tied, though, by being unable to... The governor of Maryland says, hey, my hands are tied. I can't get approval from Trump's Defense Department. Trump's Defense Department can't be reached during the siege. They're not answering the phone for 90 minutes. I can't wait to get an answer for why. Police have totally lost control of the building. It's said that what they do when they've lost control of the whole building is they just try and protect smaller and smaller spaces, like the House chamber itself, where they've got congressmen in there, the Speaker's lobby, where they barricaded the doors with chairs and furniture, the statutory hall. And this is where it gets a little bit intimate and personal to me. My greatest living hero was political comedian Will Rogers, who lived about 100 years ago and was a frequent visitor to Congress and the Capitol building, a beloved honorary member of Congress for his goodness and his kindness and his love of all humanity, his love of both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. And so loved was Will Rogers that they gave him a great American statue in the statutory hall, so that Will can still be in Congress. And as I was researching this story and looking at pictures of rioters, militia, and mob in the statutory hall, I saw my beloved hero overseeing the fucking shitstorm, which I'm sure No, which I'm somewhat grateful that he never had to live to see. And then the Metropolitan Police Force arrives. The reinforcements arrive, and thank God, because that's what turned the scene. And it is said that a man named Inspector Robert Glover was the one that saved the day. I guess he came in, he knew exactly what to do. He was like, you're gonna go this way, you're gonna go that way. We're gonna retake the famed Statutory Hall, which was like a mosh pit of shoving rioters. We're gonna do a floor-by-floor search, and you're gonna get these people out of the building. An officer later on was quoted by saying, if it wasn't for Inspector Robert Glover, we would have probably lost both chambers to looting and had a complete overtaking of the building. Acting Defense Secretary and Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy did decide to deploy the entire 11,000 strong force of the National Guard to quell the violence. In case you wondered, is fucking anybody ever going to send in the National Guard? Yes. But just because you decide to doesn't mean that they're going to arrive immediately. It will take them 2 hours to arrive, and we can discuss why later on. Meanwhile, in the House chambers, the rioters have entered the House wing and are attempting to take over the Speaker's lobby, and lawmakers are still being evacuated. At 2:39 p.m., Trump tweets again. You should know, as an unconfirmed fact, as reported in either the Washington Post or the New York Times, that, trying to be as honest as I can here, according to one of those newspapers, anonymous members of Donald Trump's staff, those close to them, said, we were all making a concentrated effort to get Donald Trump to tweet something that would stop the awful, horrible mayhem of which seemingly all of them were disagreeable to on his administration staff. And by their anonymous said accounts, he wasn't into it. But eventually at 2:24, perhaps it works, or perhaps he did it on his own volition. Donald Trump tweeted, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. Donald Trump's second use of the word peaceful on this infamous day. And the anonymous sources said this was the hardest part of the tweet to get Trump to say, for Trump's fear of appearing weak. 2:45 p.m. inside the House chamber, Congress are told to put on gas masks because tear gas was being spread around the building. And Nancy Pelosi, about this time, from her secret hiding location, is placing a phone call to Virginia's governor begging for National Guard, saying, quote, Ralph, there's glass being broken around me. I've heard there's been gunfire. We're just very, very concerned right now. And at 3 p.m., it said that the mob had entered very difficult to find Senate and congressmen's offices in this wildly complex building. But certainly that would be easier if you had had a map or a tour of the building the day before, which is exactly what the news, what members of Congress have been reporting in the past 24 hours, that in the day before, on January 5th, there was an unusual amount of MAGA-wearing, MAGA hat protesters being given tours of the building, which is said to be extraordinarily unusual. So a key question that we should all want to, perhaps a key question I'm interested in is, were they being given a reconnaissance tour, as one congressperson suggests? So they're finding both difficult to find lawmakers' offices and even secret lawmakers' offices, unmarked offices. They're finding the right ones quickly. Donald Trump tweets again at 3:14, I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. At 3:36, the White House press secretary tweets that the National Guard is on its way. And at 4:17, President Trump records a video on social media, which has since been deleted and is now extraordinarily difficult to find. On video, Donald Trump said, I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from us, take it all away from us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace, so go home. We love you. You are very special. You've seen what happens. You see the other way. You see the way the others are treated that are so bad, so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go in peace. 5:15 p.m., police officers use tear gas and percussion grenades to begin clearing out the people that are in the building and the grounds of the U.S. Capitol. And oddly enough, the Capitol Police let all the invaders who have broken many, many laws walk freely away out of the building, which will force investigators later on to try and figure out who were they. And the law enforcement, the National Guard, backup troops arrive 2 hours later. How come? Remember they were dressed in their tuxedos? That's why. Took them 2 hours to go change into the proper uniforms. At 6:01, Trump tweeted, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home in peace and in love. Go home with love and peace. Remember this day forever. That night, 3:49 p.m. is the official time, the Congress certifies Biden's election victory. And Trump releases another statement. So he said, even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. I have always said we would continue our fight to ensure that only legal votes were counted. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of the fight to make America great again. All politics aside, this man's favorite word seems to be fight. So the number of agents that were said to respond were 500 federal agents responded when it all erupted. Among them were SWAT teams, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Explosives. So, you know, they eventually got there. But what's really unusual is there's no press conference about this. Did you notice that? Like when events like big, wild, crazy shit like this goes down, like 9/11, there is an immediate press conference because the nation needs answers. And there was none. And that in and of itself is worthy of questioning why. And now we're at the day after. And you know what my key question the day after was? Who's responsible for this? And who will bear responsibility or take responsibility for this? And since there hadn't been a press conference, I didn't know the answer. Thursday, January 7th, the day after, fencing went up around the complex, and the Virginia National Guard arrived. To both of those things, better late than never. Trump tweeted a video that day. Again, it's so difficult to find this video now. It took me the better part of an hour. Maybe I'm a bad Google searcher. But the internet can delete shit fast now. And I almost wish they wouldn't have, this one. Because I think if Trump's your guy, and you want to know what he felt about this happening, and you hold Trump to be a guy that doesn't take shit from anybody. Like, no one's going to tell Trump what to do, right? If Trump's your guy, I'm pretty sure you know, like, no one's going to tell Trump what to do. So Trump made this video. So Trump said, I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. Well, I think Donald Trump's really clear there. And then he goes on to say, we've just been through an intense election, and isn't that the truth? And our emotions are high, but now tempers must be calmed and cooled. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. And then he goes on here and he talks about a smooth transition to power. And he admits that Congress has certified the election, so it's time for that smooth transition of power. And he talks really heartfelt here about what a hard time it's been for so many people with a pandemic and isolation in people's homes and a damaged economy. And he says this: rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the bonds, revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. Look the video up for yourself. There was one news conference on Thursday, and at that news conference, Robert Conti, the chief of the Metropolitan Police, came out and said there was no intelligence that suggested there would be a breach of the U.S. Capitol. And the perfect response, the best one, was by Michael Chertoff, who said, you didn't need intelligence, you just needed to read the newspaper. They were advertising, let's go wild, bring your guns. You don't need to have FBI investigations, you just need to be able to read. So I would say, would somebody please get Chief of Metropolitan Police Robert Conti III and all other law enforcement officials involved in this a subscription to USA Today, please. And late Thursday night, Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick died from this god-awful insurrection, violence, and attack on the United States Capitol. Three of those three men I referenced who are all in charge of protecting the Capitol, they all resigned. And the former sergeant of arms of the building said the police should have defended a hard line, and there should have been consequences for crossing it. The fight should have been outside, not inside. To have that confrontation at the door, that was a losing formula. And as we wind down here now, my next question, after knowing how the fuck they got in the building, which I would say, well, you know what? For some reason, there wasn't enough security. I'm still wondering why. Like, I think that'll come out. I think possibly there wasn't enough security there because somebody didn't want enough security there. And I think that there clearly were rogue officers involved opening gates for people. And the other thing that's super obvious is, how did they get in? With a little help and with a strategic plan. I'm not talking about protesters who go to a rally for their candidate of choice. I'm talking about guys who love to have military vests and weapons and who love to spend their time thinking about how to be fucking tough guys. With fantasies of 1776 and civil wars and giant takeovers of Capitol buildings. That's the answer I found, is these militia people came to do so. So my final question was, so what are the lessons that I learned from knowing the story? Well, Friday, January 8th, the Justice Department began charging everybody they could. The FBI, massive concentrated effort. Hey, they charged a 70-year-old guy who showed up there in a pickup truck loaded with bombs, mason jars filled with homemade napalm, assault rifles and handguns, and they arrested another guy that showed up again with these assault rifles and vials of injectable testosterone to play Rambo, and he had texted acquaintances that said, "I'm going to run that cunt Pelosi over while she chews on her gums. I'm going to put a bullet in her head on live TV," and he predicted that in the next 12 days, many of us in our country would die. And he posted photos of himself in blackface. Those guys that were carrying the plastic zip ties through the U.S. Capitol building. One of them said he was kind of flexing his muscles. The point of getting inside the building, quote, is to show them that we can and that we will. Here's what I think. Two things, what I learned. Of course I'm okay with protesters. God, we have to be. That's the American way. Of course I'm not okay with violence. But I think protesters and homemade militia, the two should not ever be mixed together in the same sentence. These radicalized militia is what I learned happened on that day, possibly with some co-conspiratorial help. But I learned something actually almost more significant. And I learned that in 2016, the Oxford Dictionary declared the word of the year to be post-truth. And I was like, what is post-truth? And I looked it up, and post-truth essentially is nobody knows what the fuck the truth is. There's too many alternative set of facts. There's too many disagreeable positions with something where none of us can say, I know where to find the truth. And it was the word of the year in 2016 because that's when it felt like we're now living in a post-truth era. And I think that's the real problem. I found this guy, author Timothy Snyder, who wields the word post-truth a lot and who wrote a book called Tyranny. Never once mentioned Donald Trump's name. What he'd done is it was his dedicated study to European nations that had fallen for tyranny. And the lessons learned, he said this exactly. This is what I got out of pursuing this story. If we don't have access to facts, then you and I can't trust each other. And without trust, then there's no law. And without law, then there's no democracy. So, if you want to rip the heart out of democracy directly, if you want to go after it and kill it, and that's what authoritarian leaders do, there's 3 steps. Number 1, you lie yourself all the time. Number 2, you say that it's your opponents and your journalists that lie. And number 3, everyone, the rest of us, you and me, my friend, we just look around saying, what is the truth? What is the truth? What really happened? What really happened? And then there is no truth, and resistance is impossible, and the game is over. May we find our way back to the truth. Saturday, January 9th. It's the memorial procession for fallen officer Brian Sicknick. And so all American flags are flown at half-mast in D.C. to honor the fallen police officer, except for one. The only flag still flying high is the flag over Donald Trump's White House.
Left to the jaw has knocked you down in that child